In a packed Supreme Court, Elon Musk faces Justice Amy Coney Barrett in a fiery clash over his empire's alleged crimes. Secrets unravel, corruption surfaces, and a legal titan's defiance sparks a battle for justice. The courtroom buzzed with tension, a pressure cooker of anticipation, as the mahogany doors swung open on April 26, 2025. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching like a swarm of insects. Spectators craned their necks, whispering about the man who dared to challenge the highest court in the land, Elon Musk. The tech titan strode in, his sharp gray suit cutting through the room's stale air, his face a mask of calm determination. Across from him, Justice Amy Coney Barrett sat at the bench, her black robe stark against the polished wood, her eyes narrowing as they locked onto Musk. The air crackled with hostility, a silent promise of a showdown that would echo far beyond these walls. The case was unprecedented. Musk's Neuralink Corporation stood accused of violating federal bioethics laws on a massive scale. Prosecutors alleged that Neuralink's brain-computer interface experiments, conducted on thousands of volunteers, had bypassed mandatory oversight, endangering lives and breaching constitutional protections. The government claimed the company's unchecked ambition threatened public safety, citing reports of neurological damage in test subjects. The stakes were astronomical. Neuralink's future hung in the balance, and with it, Musk's vision of merging humanity with artificial intelligence. A conviction could dismantle his empire and land him in prison. Yet Musk, known for his audacity, had chosen to represent himself, a move that had stunned legal analysts and electrified the public. Barrett's gavel fell, silencing the room. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice clipped, "you stand before this court accused of reckless endangerment through Neuralink's unauthorized experiments. Do you understand the gravity of these charges?" Her tone dripped with condescension, as if addressing a child caught misbehaving. Musk met her gaze, unflinching. "I understand the charges, Justice Barrett," he replied, his voice steady, "but I dispute their foundation. This case isn't about endangerment. It's about innovation stifled by bureaucratic overreach." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Barrett's lips tightened, her composure fraying at the edges. The justice leaned forward, her words sharp. "You presume to lecture this court on law, Mr. Musk? Your company's actions have caused harm, and your arrogance only compounds the offense." She gestured to a stack of documents, prosecutors' evidence detailing Neuralink's alleged violations. Musk didn't blink. "With respect, Justice, those documents are incomplete. I have evidence that will clarify the truth if the court permits." His polite defiance sent a jolt through the room. Barrett hesitated, her fingers twitching on the gavel. "Proceed," she said, her voice colder than steel, "but tread carefully." Musk began his defense with surgical precision, citing constitutional law with the fluency of a seasoned attorney. He argued that Neuralink's experiments were protected under the First Amendment as expressions of scientific inquiry, a right the government had no authority to suppress without clear evidence of harm. He presented data showing that Neuralink's trials had followed rigorous internal protocols, with consent forms signed by every participant. "The government's case," Musk declared, "rests on fear, not facts. They seek to criminalize progress." His words landed like a gauntlet, challenging the court's authority and Barrett's impartiality. But something was off. Barrett's rulings grew erratic, her interruptions more frequent. She dismissed Musk's motions with barely a glance, her explanations curt and inconsistent. When Musk attempted to introduce a key piece of evidence, a whistleblower's testimony alleging government pressure to fabricate Neuralink's violations, she cut him off, claiming it was irrelevant. The courtroom stirred uneasily. Musk's eyes narrowed, sensing a pattern. He'd heard whispers of Barrett's ties to biotech lobbyists, rivals of Neuralink who stood to gain from its downfall. Was she rigging the trial? As the session drew to a close, Musk made a bold move. "Justice Barrett," he said, his voice carrying a quiet menace, "I request a recess to submit evidence of judicial bias in this case." The room froze. Barrett's face paled, her gavel hovering mid-air. She recovered quickly, slamming it down. "Request denied," she snapped. "This court will not entertain baseless accusations." But the seed was planted. Reporters exchanged glances, their notebooks filling with questions. Musk's gamble had shifted the narrative, and the real battle was just beginning. The Supreme Court chamber pulsed with unease as Justice Amy Coney Barrett's gavel echoed, her denial of Elon Musk's recess request hanging like a storm cloud. Musk stood motionless, his piercing gaze fixed on her, a predator sizing up its prey. The reporters' whispers grew louder, their pens darting across notebooks, capturing the electric moment. Barrett's face, though composed, betrayed a flicker of unease. Her eyes darted to the other justices, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Musk's accusation of bias had cracked the courtroom's veneer of impartiality, and the tension was palpable, a coiled spring ready to snap. Barrett cleared her throat, her voice taut. "Mr. Musk, you will refrain from theatrics and address the charges at hand. This court is not your stage." Her words were meant to reassert control, but they landed hollow, drowned by the weight of Musk's challenge. He tilted his head slightly, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Theatrics, Justice? I'm merely seeking a fair trial. If you're confident in your impartiality, why block my evidence?" The room inhaled sharply. The audacity of his words sent a shiver through the spectators, who leaned forward, hanging on every syllable. Barrett's jaw tightened, her knuckles whitening around the gavel. "You overstep, Mr. Musk. Present your defense or face contempt." But Musk was undeterred, his voice steady as he pivoted back to Neuralink's case. He projected a series of charts onto the courtroom screen, detailing the company's safety protocols and participant outcomes. "These records," he said, "show 0 fatalities and a 98% success rate in our trials. The government's claims of harm are exaggerated based on cherry-picked data." He paused, letting the numbers sink in. "If anyone's biased, it's the prosecution, driven by competitors who fear Neuralink's potential." The other justices exchanged glances, some nodding faintly, but Barrett's interruptions grew sharper. She questioned Musk's data authenticity, dismissing his sources as unverified without review. When he cited a Fourth Amendment violation, government agents seizing Neuralink's private servers without a warrant, she cut him off, ruling the argument tangential. The pattern was unmistakable now, her rulings skewing against Musk. With surgical precision, spectators murmured, sensing the scales tipping unfairly. A young clerk, stationed near the bench, fumbled with papers, her eyes darting nervously between Barrett and Musk. Musk's mind raced. He'd anticipated resistance, but Barrett's brazen obstruction pointed to something deeper. His team had uncovered documents suggesting her private meetings with biotech executives, rivals of Neuralink, who'd funneled millions into lobbying against his company. The whistleblower's testimony, which Barrett had suppressed, detailed these connections, hinting at a quid pro quo. Musk knew exposing her would require irrefutable proof, and he'd come prepared. But Barrett was playing dirty. During a brief recess, he noticed the clerk slip a note to the prosecution, a move too deliberate to be innocent. As the session resumed, Musk shifted tactics, baiting Barrett to reveal her hand. "Justice," he said, his tone measured, "your rulings consistently favor the prosecution. I wonder if your ties to Neuralink's competitors influence your judgment." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Barrett's face flushed, her voice rising. "You dare slander this court? I'll have you removed." But Musk pressed on, producing a printed email leaked from a biotech firm, naming Barrett in a scheme to sabotage Neuralink's trials. "This," he said, holding it aloft, "deserves scrutiny. Will you allow it into evidence, or bury it like the rest?" Barrett froze, her authority unraveling. The other justices leaned forward, their expressions a mix of shock and curiosity. The email wasn't conclusive, but its existence was a grenade, threatening to detonate her credibility. She stammered, "That document is inadmissible, hearsay." But her voice cracked, and the room sensed weakness. Reporters scribbled furiously, their headlines already forming. Musk's gamble was paying off, but he wasn't done. He requested a sidebar, his voice low. "Justice, if you're innocent, let the court see the truth. Or are you afraid of what we'll find?" Barrett's eyes blazed, but she couldn't afford to lose control. "Sidebar denied," she snapped, her voice trembling. The clerk dropped a folder, papers scattering, her panic betraying complicity. Musk's stare locked onto Barrett, a silent vow that he'd unearth her secrets. The courtroom buzzed, the narrative shifting from Neuralink's guilt to Barrett's corruption. As the session adjourned, a reporter's voice cut through the chaos. "Is Justice Barrett hiding something?" The question lingered, a spark ready to ignite a firestorm. The Supreme Court chamber simmered with unrest as the session adjourned. The reporter's question, "Is Justice Barrett hiding something?" echoing like a gunshot. Spectators spilled into the halls, their murmurs a rising tide of suspicion. Inside, Elon Musk gathered his notes, his expression unreadable, but his mind alight with strategy. Justice Amy Coney Barrett's trembling denial and the clerk's fumbled papers had exposed a fault line, and Musk was ready to pry it open. The scattered documents, glimpsed briefly, bore the logo of a biotech giant, Neuralink's fiercest rival. Barrett's composure was cracking, and the courtroom, once her domain, now felt like a battlefield where Musk held the advantage. As proceedings resumed, the air was thick with anticipation. Barrett ascended the bench, her face a mask of forced calm, but her eyes betrayed a hunted look. The other justices, sensing the shift, sat straighter, their gazes flickering between her and Musk. The clerk, visibly shaken, avoided eye contact, busying herself with files. Musk stood, his presence commanding, and addressed the court. "Yesterday I raised concerns about judicial bias," he said, his voice clear and deliberate. "Today, I renew my request to submit evidence that questions this court's integrity." The room braced itself, reporters poised like hawks. Barrett's response was swift, her voice sharp but unsteady. "Mr. Musk, you persist in disrupting this trial with baseless claims. Focus on the charges against Neuralink, or I'll hold you in contempt." Her threat rang hollow, undermined by the clerk's earlier blunder and the email Musk had brandished. He seized the moment, producing a new document, a sworn affidavit from a former biotech executive. "This," Musk declared, "details meetings between Justice Barrett and industry leaders who funded a smear campaign against Neuralink. It's not hearsay, it's testimony." The courtroom erupted, spectators gasping, reporters scribbling. Barrett's gavel slammed repeatedly, her voice rising. "Order! This is inadmissible!" But her protests only fueled the chaos. "Justice," Kavanaugh, breaking protocol, interjected. "Justice Barrett, perhaps we should review the document." His tone was neutral, but the implication was damning, a crack in the bench's unity. Barrett's face flushed, her authority teetering. She snapped, "The document is irrelevant to Neuralink's violations." But Musk was relentless. "Irrelevant?" he countered. "Or inconvenient? These meetings coincided with the government's case against my company. Coincidence, Justice?" The accusation landed like a thunderclap. Barrett's bias was no longer a whisper but a public challenge. Musk pressed his advantage, citing constitutional law with precision. "The Sixth Amendment guarantees an impartial tribunal," he said. "If this court suppresses evidence of collusion, it violates my rights and the public's trust." His words resonated, stirring unease among the justices. Even the prosecution, usually smug, shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tide turning. Barrett, cornered, tried to redirect. "Your legal theories don't excuse Neuralink's reckless experiments," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then came the bombshell. Musk revealed he'd obtained metadata from the leaked email, showing it was sent from a private server linked to Barrett's office. "This server," he said, holding up a printout, "was used to coordinate with Neuralink's rivals. I can provide the logs if the court allows." The room froze. Barrett's eyes widened, a flicker of panic betraying her. She'd been tampering with the trial, quietly instructing the clerk to misfile Musk's motions and leak his strategies. To the prosecution. The clerk, now pale, clutched her desk, her complicity exposed by her own nervous glances. Barrett recovered, her voice icy. "You're fabricating conspiracies, Mr. Musk. This court won't indulge your fantasies." But the damage was done. The other justices exchanged looks, their silence deafening. A Spectator's phone buzzed, a news alert already spreading. Musk alleges Supreme Court corruption. The clerk, under pressure, dropped another paper, a memo with Barrett's handwritten notes, hinting at a plan to fast-track Neuralink's conviction. It fluttered to the floor, unnoticed by Barrett, but spotted by a sharp-eyed reporter. As the session paused, Musk leaned toward his team, whispering, "We've got her." The reporter, clutching the memo, slipped it to a colleague who raced to publish. Barrett, oblivious, prepared to resume, but the courtroom's mood had shifted, irrevocably. The question wasn't Neuralink's guilt anymore. It was whether Barrett could survive the scrutiny. Musk's evidence was piling up, and the truth was closing in. The Supreme Court chamber hummed with a restless energy as the session reconvened, the weight of Elon Musk's accusations against Justice Amy Coney Barrett pressing down like a gathering storm. Musk's whispered confidence, "We've got her," lingered in the air, a quiet promise of reckoning. The reporter's colleague, now racing to break the story of Barrett's damning memo, had ignited a fuse that was about to detonate. Barrett, unaware of the memo's exposure, adjusted her robes and fixed Musk with a steely glare, determined to reclaim control. But the courtroom's atmosphere had shifted. Spectators leaned forward, justices exchanged wary glances, and the clerk, her hands trembling, avoided Barrett's gaze. The narrative had flipped, and Barrett was no longer the arbiter of justice, but a suspect in her own court. Musk rose, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, a predator closing in. "Justice Barrett," he began, his voice cutting through the tension, "I'd like to revisit the evidence you've repeatedly dismissed, evidence that now includes your own handwritten notes." The room gasped as he held up a photocopy of the memo, its scrawled instructions unmistakable. "Delay Musk's filings. Expedite prosecution's motions." Barrett's face drained of color, her gavel frozen mid-air. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice a mix of fury and fear. Musk's response was calm, devastating. "From your clerk's desk, Justice. It seems she's less careful than you'd hoped." The courtroom erupted, voices overlapping in a chaotic swell. Barrett slammed her gavel, her composure splintering. "This is an outrage. That document is fabricated." But her denial rang hollow. The clerk's panicked expression and the memo's distinct handwriting betrayed her. Justice Gorsuch, his brow furrowed, leaned forward. "Justice Barrett, we must address this. The court's integrity is at stake." His words, measured but firm, were a blow to Barrett's authority, signaling a fracture among the justices. The prosecution, sensing disaster, scrambled to object, but their arguments drowned in the uproar. Musk seized the moment, his legal acumen on full display. "This memo," he said, projecting it onto the courtroom screen, "proves a deliberate effort to sabotage my defense. It violates due process under the Fifth Amendment and judicial ethics under Article 3. I move for your recusal, Justice Barrett, and an investigation into your conduct." The room stilled, the gravity of his motion sinking in. A justice's recusal in a Supreme Court case was rare, a public humiliation that could end a career. Barrett's eyes blazed, but her hands shook, betraying her panic. She tried to counter, her voice shrill. "You have no standing to demand my recusal, Mr. Musk. Your accusations are a desperate ploy to dodge accountability for Neuralink's crimes." But Musk was relentless, producing a digital log from the private server he'd mentioned earlier. "These logs," he said, "show communications between your office and biotech lobbyists, timed with key rulings against me. Care to explain, Justice?" The evidence was circumstantial but damning, painting a picture of corruption that the public could no longer ignore. Reporters typed furiously, their live updates flooding social media. Musk exposes Barrett's collusion. Barrett's tampering had been meticulous. She'd instructed the clerk to misfile Musk's evidence, leak his strategies to the prosecution, and even alter court transcripts to downplay her ruling's bias. But her plan unraveled with the memos. Discovery, a careless slip that Musk's team had pounced on. The clerk, now cornered, burst into tears, her sobs echoing in the silent chamber. "I didn't want to," she stammered. "She made me." The confession was a dagger, and Barrett's face crumpled, her authority collapsing. The other justices, now openly troubled, conferred in hushed tones. Chief Justice Roberts, his expression grim, signaled a recess. "We'll review this evidence," he said, his voice heavy. Barrett protested, her voice rising. "This is a witch hunt." But her colleagues ignored her, their trust shattered. As the justices filed out, Musk turned to his team, his voice low. "The truth's out. Now we push." Outside, news vans multiplied, cameras flashing as the memo's contents hit the airwaves. The public's outrage was palpable, trending hashtags demanding Barrett's resignation. As the recess stretched on, a new figure entered the fray. A federal investigator summoned by Roberts, clutching a subpoena for Barrett's server records. The courtroom doors swung open, and the investigator's presence sent a chill through the room. Barrett, returning to the bench, froze at the sight. Musk's stare met hers, unyielding, a silent vow that her secrets would not survive the day. The Supreme Court chamber crackled with dread as the federal investigator's footsteps echoed, the subpoena in his hand, a guillotine poised to fall. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, resuming her seat, gripped the bench, her face ashen as she met Elon Musk's unrelenting gaze. The recess had only sharpened the stakes, with news of her leaked memo and the clerk's confession spreading like wildfire. Outside, crowds gathered, chanting for justice, while reporters broadcast every twist live. Chief Justice Roberts, his expression stern, signaled the session's restart. But the courtroom felt like a stage for Barrett's unraveling, not Neuralink's trial. Musk stood, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos he'd ignited, ready to deliver the final blow. The investigator approached the bench, presenting the subpoena. "This court is now under federal review," he announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "We're seizing Justice Barrett's server records to investigate allegations of judicial misconduct." Barrett's eyes widened, her voice a strained whisper. "This is an abuse of process." But Roberts, unmoved, nodded to the investigator. "Proceed." The other justices, their faces grim, offered no defense, their silence a tacit acknowledgement of Barrett's betrayal. The clerk, now a trembling shadow, avoided Barrett's glare, her earlier sobs still ringing in the room. Musk seized the moment, his voice steady but searing. "Justice Barrett, your actions, suppressing evidence, colluding with Neuralink's rivals, and manipulating this trial, violate the Constitution and public trust. I renew my motion for your recusal and demand a mistrial." The room held its breath. Barrett, cornered, lashed out. "You've orchestrated this spectacle, Mr. Musk, to evade accountability for your company's crimes." But her words crumbled under the weight of evidence. The memo, the server logs, the clerk's confession. The prosecution, once confident, sat mute, their case overshadowed by Barrett's disgrace. Roberts intervened, his tone grave. "Justice Barrett, the evidence suggests impropriety. To preserve this court's integrity, you are recused from this case." The gavel fell, a death knell to Barrett's authority. She sat frozen, her career in tatters, as whispers of resignation swirled. Musk, undeterred, pivoted to Neuralink's defense, presenting a final piece of evidence: a peer-reviewed study proving the safety of his trials. "The government's case," he declared, "was built on lies, fueled by corruption. I ask this court to dismiss the charges." The remaining justices, now led by Roberts, conferred briefly before ruling. "Charges against Neuralink are dismissed, pending further review." The courtroom erupted in cheers and gasps, reporters racing to file their stories. Barrett, escorted from the bench, vanished behind closed doors, her legacy shattered. The investigators' team moved swiftly, seizing her records, uncovering a web of biotech lobbying that implicated other officials. Musk, stepping into the hall, faced a sea of cameras, his voice resolute. This wasn't just about Neuralink, it was about truth. No one is above the law. His words, broadcast globally, sparked a firestorm of debate, with hashtags like "Shocked Justice for Musk" trending worldwide. The aftermath was seismic. Barrett resigned days later, her ties to biotech giants exposed in a scathing DOJ report. The Supreme Court, stung by the scandal, implemented stricter ethics protocols, while Congress launched hearings on judicial reform. Neuralink, vindicated, resumed its work under tighter oversight, its mission intact. Musk's defiance became a rallying cry, inspiring activists to challenge systemic corruption. By year's end, new laws strengthened judicial accountability, ensuring no judge could manipulate a trial as Barrett had. Musk, reflecting on the ordeal, spoke at a tech conference, his tone humble but firm. "I didn't fight for myself. I fought for a system that works. If we don't stand up, who will?" The crowd roared, a testament to his triumph. The Supreme Court showdown, once a battle over Neuralink, had transformed into a landmark victory for justice, proving one man's resolve could reshape a nation's conscience. As Musk walked off stage, the world watched, knowing the fight for fairness had just begun, but its champion had already won.